Hey guys, it's Lisa Childs here from triedtestedandtrue.com. Today we're making sourdough. It is 10 p.m. on Thursday evening and this bread got started at about 7 p.m. yesterday. This is a work of art. It is so delicious, so healthy for you. And the only ingredients are flour, water, and salt. Like so many of you, I found myself with a lot of extra time in about March of 2020, and I picked up sourdough baking as one of my hobbies during that time. Since then, I've baked tons of sourdough loaves and I absolutely love it, but my absolute favorite recipe is from Pro Home Cooks. So today we're making his recipe. I'm going to show you how to do it. The most important element when making real sourdough bread is having an active start. This video is not going to go into having a start, so if you already have a start, this is the right video for you. If you want a video on how to make and maintain a starter, I can do that later. I've used a ton of different sourdough bread recipes and this is the best, so let's get started. The best way to know if your start is ready and at its most active state is to do something called the water test. So what you can do is take your bubbly start, it has to be at least doubled in size, and this rubber band right here is telling me where my start started, and it has grown more than double in size, which gives me confidence that this is good. It's nice and bubbly, it smells nice and sweet and sour. We're just gonna plop some in some water, and if this floats, this is called the float test, if it floats, then it's ready to bake with. Pro Home Cooks recipe calls for 160 grams of active start. When a recipe calls for active start, it means that this state, very active and live and bubbly. So I'm using a kitchen scale because that is the most accurate way to measure anything, and sourdough is all about ratios. So you have to get the ratios and the weight and the hydration correct. So this is kind of bubbled all the way over. We are gonna do 160 grams of start. Wow, it is so bubbly. And how I made this is I just had my start that has been kind of dormant in the fridge. Last night I took it out and I let it come up to room temperature and I fed it equal parts water and flour. Mix it up until it gets to a thick pancake batter-like consistency, and then I just let it sit overnight until it grew double in size. Now it's perfectly bubbly, fragrant, it's perfect. So I find that these big tubs, I bought these at Sam's Club. These are the best for sourdough because it has lines on the side. You can see how much it has grown. It's clear so you can clearly see it. It has a lid. This is like the best. I like using this versus using a bowl. Now we're gonna add 560 grams of warm water. I'm just gonna use the water that we did our float test in. And then I like to stir the water so it dissolves the start. One of the things I really love about this recipe is that you put all the ingredients in at the very beginning. There are some recipes where you start with the water, the start, and then some flour, and then you have to mix in other ingredients, more water, more salt. But this recipe is really simple and I really like that. It also has really good flavor and spring, which is one of the most important things with sourdough bread. So you mix this up until it looks nice and cloudy like this. Now we'll add our salt. I only use Redmond real salt. You know how much I love this. This is 18 grams. Just pour that in there. We're gonna do 100 grams of whole wheat flour. If you don't have whole wheat flour, you can do the entire amount with bread flour. However, I found that using this whole wheat flour really makes that flavor of the bread so much better. It makes it more sour, it makes it more tangy, and it has a very much more complex flavor. So we'll do 100 grams of whole wheat flour. And next we're gonna do 600 grams of bread flour. I use Lehigh Mills. It's a local mill here in Utah. It's wonderful, non-bleached bread flour. And bread flour is really good because it has more gluten. Gluten makes things really stretchy and chewy, and that's what we want for bread. Okay, I've got my bucket here on my kitchen scale, and we'll measure out 600 grams. That's a cup and a half. This is about a cup and a half, and that's about 500 grams. This recipe makes 2 loaves of bread or 3 small ones. Okay, we've got that. We will mix. I'm using my favorite ThermoWorks rubber spatulas. These things are amazing. There's a metal rod that runs all the way through here, so this is never going to break. You need something really sturdy when making sourdough because it's like really hard sometimes, so you really need something that's not going to break. The most important part in this step is to make sure that all the flour gets a little bit of liquid on it. So you want to mix this really well to make sure that all the flour can absorb some water. We don't want any dry spots. Once I've got my dough mostly mixed, I like to go in with my hand and just kind of squeeze and make sure all of that flour is getting some liquid on it. I have a cut on my hand today, so that's why I have a glove on. But we really want to make sure that there's no dry patches. Now all of our dough is nice and moist, and we're going to let this just sit here for about 10 to 20 minutes. This step is really important because then it allows the flour to absorb all that liquid. So we're gonna cover this for about 10 to 20 minutes and then come back and give it our first set of folds. The 10 minutes are up, and that was called the autolyse. So now we are going to unveil the bread. And spoiler, it looks just the same. But now what we have to do is to give our bread folds. I know most people who are used to bread baking with conventional yeast will knead their bread in order to make it nice and chewy, have tension, make it nice and smooth. With sourdough, we need to be very gentle, so we're going to be doing some folds. For the next 2 to 2.5 hours, we are going to be doing folds. So what I like to do to keep track of it is to write down on a piece of paper how many folds I need, which is usually about 4 to 5, and the time. So right now it's 11:30. I'm gonna do my first set of folds, and in half an hour at 12 o'clock, I'll do the next ones all the way down. We're going to keep folding the bread every 30 minutes until it has really nice tension, it's nice and smooth, and it has bubbles. One of the things that conventional bakers kind of have a hard time with is when they're working with sourdough, we don't add flour. If your dough is sticky when you're baking with conventional yeast, usually you just sprinkle in a little flour until it's okay. With sourdough, we want to use the opposite, which is water. So I'm gonna wet my hand, and then that is going to help it not to stick. This is how we fold sourdough. So my hand is wet like this, and what I like to do is just pull from the bottom and then literally just fold it over like that. You can see it's nice and stretchy, and fold it over. The first couple folds that you do are going to be a little bit messy like this, but then it will start creating nice tension even by the second one. Second or third one, you're like really good. So then I kind of twist it, fold over and around. You can already see it's starting to kind of go up into a ball like this. And if you see any flour pockets, or you shouldn't have any pockets, but if you see any floury spots, just kind of pinch them in. You want to be really gentle with this. I like to kind of get all this stuff off the sides. If you really want, you can use a tool like this. This is just kind of like a cleaning, scraping tool to scrape everything off the sides of your bowl. And then I like to give it usually like one last good little fold over. And that's what it looks like. Kind of slack, but it still already has lots more shape than it did just a couple minutes ago. So I'm going to cover this again, set a timer for 30 minutes, and do it again. It's now 12 o'clock, so it's time for that second fold. This is what it looks like. And I'm just going to wet my hand in a little water and then do the folds just like we did before. You can see it kind of relaxed a little bit. It's a little droopy, you can see in here. So same thing, go in underneath and fold over. Wow, you can already see the tension on the surface of the bread. Turn it about 40 degrees. Go one more time. Perfect. This bread is looking beautiful. We are going to let it rest for another 30 minutes and then we'll keep folding. You may have noticed that we had some leftover starter that we did not use. What you can do is stick it straight in the fridge and then just keep it there until you're ready to use it the next time. There are lots of recipes out there for sourdough discard that can be used in an active when it's all bubbly, or in an inactive state when it's flat, started to go down. It's time for the third fold. Wet our hands with some water, and you're gonna see a big difference here. Look. It's turning into a ball. Okay, as soon as it looks like this and it's not pulling on the sides, what I like to do is actually kind of fold it. So I'll take another glove like this, wet both my hands, and go down on either end like this. Take it out of the bucket and fold it like this. I'm gonna sweep my hand over the top, tuck it. See, there's a little bit of sticking here. Just wanna wet it and that will alleviate. And then just keep tucking. See how the sides are kind of going down like that? You want to tuck, and then you're gonna start seeing air bubbles on the surface of the dough. And it's turning into a ball. Oh, this is magic. Okay, we wanna be really gentle with it now. We don't want this to tear or rip. So, I'm gonna put that in there, give it another 30 minutes. This is what it looks like. You can see there are bubbles forming on the surface of the dough, which is wonderful. I'm gonna go in with 2 hands and just pull it from the sides, and you want it to stick to the edges like that. You want it to stick to the edges of your bowl. That's gonna cause tension. It's pulling our bread for us. So I have our bread like this. I'm just going to wrap it up and then fold this outside and fold this outside. Oh, wow, this is amazing. I'm just gonna keep kind of lightly pushing in with my fingers right here on the bottom to create more tension on the top of our bread. Look how amazing that is. Just a couple hours ago, this was totally slack, and now it's this tight ball. Oh, and it smells beautiful. Beautiful. Okay, this is our last fold, and what we're gonna do is put it back in our bin here, and we're going to cover this, and then we are going to do what's called a bulk ferment. We are going to cover this for several hours or until the dough has doubled in size. Because I don't know the temperature of your water, the strength of your starter, I won't be able to tell you exactly how long it's going to take, but usually it takes several hours. And don't rush this part. In addition to the flour, water, and salt, thyme is the most important ingredient in sourdough bread. So we are going to let this sit for several hours. We'll come back when it has doubled in size, and then we can shape. It is now 4:05 and this bread is looking amazing. Look at the dough, it's risen about double, and what we're going to do is split this in half and do a first set of coil folds. To do this, I'm just gonna do a tiny bit of bread flour on the bench. Just use my hands here. And then what I like to do, which is so satisfying, is to just take the dough and do it upside down and wait for it to kind of fall down. And it's really satisfying when it works. Sometimes it needs a little help. There we go. So you want to flour your bench. And now we've got this beautiful dough. This is exactly how it looks once it comes out. Look at this giant bubble right here. That's great. You can see all the strands of gluten, nice and stretchy. Oh, stunning. You want the bottom to be floured and the top to be unfloured. So I'm just taking a little bench scraper and I'm going to cut this right about in half. If you want smaller loaves, you can also do 3 that are smaller. Okay, I'm gonna put that one aside and just take this one. Okay, what you want is this stickiness on the top. So if you need to flour your hands a little bit, you can like this. Take it from the bottom and stretch it out. Stretch it out like this. I like to make kind of a rectangular shape. And then we're gonna do our first set of folds. So what I'm going to do is just take this top part and just fold it right over each other like this. Now you take those corners that are left, same thing, like this. So now it looks kind of like like a log. Then I take it from the bottom and roll it up. You want to be so gentle, okay? Now you've got this loaf and we want to create some more tension on the top. So I'm going to take my hands and just turn it. Allow the bottom of the dough to kind of stick to the counter, and you just want to kind of pull the top, but we don't want any tearing. You're gonna see lots of little air bubbles on the top that looks stunning. One other thing you can do is kind of put it away from you. Put your hands like this in a little, I don't know what this is, like a U shape, and just put it on the counter and pull. Turn it 90 degrees, do the same thing, pull and kind of tuck under. Yes, beautiful. What we want is a nice tight ball, just like this. It's beautiful. Okay, so this is gonna be the first fold, okay? That one's gonna go right here, and we wanna do the same thing with both loaves. Now that we have our loaves shaped like this, look how beautiful they are. They're smooth on the top. You can see air bubbles everywhere. They're amazing. We are going to cover this with a cloth and let it rest for 20 minutes. In the meantime, we are going to get our Banneton baskets prepared. If you don't have baskets, you can just use a bowl with a towel on them. So this one, it looks like a little hairnet, but it's cloth, and I'm going to do one of each. So this one I'm going to do with the cloth inside like this, so then there's not going to be really texture on there. This one has these swirls, so then you're going to be able to see those on the finished bread. To prepare them, I'm just going to sprinkle them with a little bit of rice flour. This is literally just long grain white rice that I blended in my blender until it made a nice fine powder. The reason we use rice flour is because it's gluten-free and it's not going to absorb into the bread. That's going to give us a much nicer crumb. It's going to be a little bit crispier on the outside of the bread, and it won't absorb and get all floury. So just like that, and then same over here. Just pour a little in here, and we just kind of spread that all around so then it does not stick. Okay, it's been 20 minutes and they look great. The number one thing you want to look for with these loaves is that they haven't like melted into the counter. They have kept most of their shape. They have relaxed a little bit, but not too much. That's wonderful. So I'm going to move that one to the side here, and we're going to do what's called a final shaping. So what I like to do is, this is the drier side, the top. So I'm going to flip that, so now it's on the bottom. Then I take my hands again and just kind of stretch it out just a little bit. Really gently. And I kind of flap it against the counter till I get somewhat of a little rectangle. Now we can do more of those folds this way. Another technique that we can do is called kind of like the diaper fold. So I'm going to take one edge of my dough, kind of flap it out a little bit and fold it into the middle. Then I'm going to take this other half on the opposite side, fold it over. Then I take the top, fold it over. Then I take the bottom and I fold it all the way over. It's kind of like a little croissant action here, one of those folded ones. So now, same thing I did last time. You want to stretch, turn, and create that tension on the top of the dough. So we see all these beautiful bubbles. This is amazing. Isn't this incredible that you can get this out of just 3 ingredients? It's pretty amazing. Okay, now that we have this, we are going to put it in our Banneton. So this is the top, and I'm gonna put it straight into my basket. The finished side down. So the seam is on the top. Want to make sure that you don't have any seams that are going to pop open when you bake this. So just pinch everything on the bottom if you need to. And then I'm going to cover this with a little bit more rice flour on the sides here and the top. Now I know Mike from Pro Home Cooks uses regular flour, but I prefer to use the rice flour because I think it just has a much better final presentation. It also doesn't taste like you're eating raw burned flour. That's not appetizing, and I think this is just the more professional way to do it. So we'll cover this with the little shower cap, and we'll do the same thing with the other one. Got our basket, and we're going to just dump it straight down like that. That was the final shaping of our dough, and it looks absolutely amazing. I've got one that's in the cloth basket and one that's directly in the basket with a cloth over it. And what I personally like to do is put these in the fridge overnight so then they get a really nice long ferment. This is called a cold ferment or a cold retard, and then that just develops that flavor so much better in my opinion because it's fermenting that whole time. That's why sourdough is so good for you. If you don't have time to let it rest overnight, then you can just let this sit in the basket for several hours until it passes the poke test, and then you can bake it. I'm going to let both of these rest for a couple hours because I unfortunately don't have time and I want to bake them off tonight. So I'm going to cover the one that's uncovered, let it sit at room temperature for probably 2 to 4 hours depending on how fast it rises. That depends on how healthy your start is, and then we'll come back later and bake them off. It is 8 o'clock and it's finally ready to bake. So let me show you what we've got here. This is the bread that's been proofing. I believe we started our proof at 4:30 and it's kind of jiggly. This is how you know that it's ready to bake. You give it a little poke. So just right here on the edge, I'm going to give it a little poke. And if it springs back just a little bit, but it still leaves an indent like that, we're ready to bake. This is the one I'm going to show you because we did it without the cloth on the inner basket, so then you can see how pretty it's going to look. So I just brush it off a little bit like this, and then you want a piece of parchment. Here's the grand reveal. Okay, what I like to do is just take a brush and brush off any of this excess rice flour. Next, we have a lamb here, and I'm going to just slice it straight down the middle. There are many different cuts that you can do, but the main thing is you want to do it fast and straight. Oh no, okay, I punctured it a little bit. We've got one cut straight down the middle, and this is going to look really nice. It's gonna give the bread somewhere to expand, otherwise it's just gonna crack somewhere. So having this cut is actually really important. So my oven has been preheating for 1 hour at 450 degrees. You can go up to 500 degrees. I really like that 450. I feel like I get the best results from it. I have a Dutch oven in here that's been preheating this whole time, so it's screaming hot and ready for that bread. One of the things that you need is a pot with a lid on it because we want to trap in all that steam inside the pot so then it gets that nice oven spring and it gets a really nice crumb. So that's why I have that in my oven. Just gonna bring my bread right over, plop it in, and then here's a trick is I take ice cubes and I put them just around the sides of the pot. So I've got the bread in there, the ice cubes melt and are going to create steam. So I'm going to make sure that is tight on there, put it in the middle. We're gonna cook this for 20 minutes. And I like to put some cookie sheets or something like that underneath so then the heat is not quite so direct on the bottom of the pot. You don't get any burned bread on the bottom. The heat kind of distributes down here too. Timer just went off, it's been 20 minutes. Now we're gonna take the lid off for the last 10 minutes. Beautiful. So now we'll go another 10 minutes. It's looking nice and browned. You can put it in until you get the color that you want, but we always want to check the temperature. I try and find like a little hole. You want to go in, it has to be at least 200 degrees, temping at 203. So I'm going to take this out. This is what the bread looks like. You can see air bubbles all throughout that have burst. Ooh, it's very, very hot. One of the most important things with sourdough bread is that you want to make sure that it is cool before you cut into it. If you listen closely, in a couple minutes, we're going to start hearing the sourdough sing. It's called when the sourdough sings. It's when the bread kind of crackles and you can hear it just crackle and snap. It's so pretty. I'm going to let this bread rest for about 2 hours before I cut into it. Oh, I could hear it. Can you hear it? That's so amazing. Okay, so I'm going to let the bread sit here and cool for about 2 hours until it's completely cool. If I were to try and cut that right now, the bread would be like a soggy mess. It's still technically cooking. It's very moist in there. If I cut it, it's just gonna be kind of doughy, and not because it's not cooked, but because once you like cut into the bread, it will kind of mash everything together in there. So we wanna let that crumb get nice and intact before we eat it. Our bread has cooled and it's perfect. It's ready to eat and to cut into. So I have my favorite bread knife. This is like under 20 bucks and it is like one of the best knives I own. So what I'm going to do is just cut right in the center so then we can see the crumb. What we want to see are air bubbles. We want to see an even crumb where there's bubbles all throughout evenly, and it's going to taste amazing. Here's the grand reveal. Beautiful. All of these bubbles throughout the bread are those bubbles that we created while we were folding and turning our bread. How I like to cut my bread is I like to cut it straight down the middle, and if I want a really large piece, I'll cut one more going this way. Otherwise, I'll just put it down on the widest base and then cut this way. When you're cutting bread, you never want to just mash straight down. Don't do that. What you want to do is very lightly go back and forth with a knife with a serrated edge. You don't want to push down. You just do it very lightly and just let the bread cut. That way you're not squishing anything. So then I have these little half pieces of bread and they're perfect. It is hot in my house. This butter is very, very, very soft. We've got our bread. And if you're not using salted butter, I recommend doing a little sprinkle of salt. But I can't wait to taste this and tell you what it tastes like. Sorry, I'm having a moment. The outside crust is really chewy. The inside is soft and pillowy, but it has nice stretch and elasticity. The bottom is not burned at all, so it's just the same kind of crust all the way around, and it has wonderful sour flavor. It's very mild, but it's very good. Oh, so good. If you want your bread to be more sour, then what you can do is ferment it longer. So this was made and baked in the same day. I almost never do that because I want to develop that flavor more. So the other loaf is in the freezer. I'm going to leave that in there for 2 to 3 days, and then I'll just bake it just like I did this loaf, from cold, straight from the fridge into the oven, slash it, bake it, and it's gonna be perfect. The flavor will be more developed then, and it will have a longer time to ferment. So enjoy. If you like this video, make sure you watch this video next. You're going to love it, and we'll see you next week. Bye.